Alright, so this is the beginning of the second chapter of my book, or my story, and I'm just going to read a couple more chapters. So, chapter 2. Agent Thompson, what the hell were you thinking? Do you know how damaging this could have become to the Bureau's credibility if they ever profiled agents as drunken imbeciles whipping their dicks out in public and pissing on patrons? With all due respect, sir, the depraved acts that were performed on this foul day were more the works of the subconscious mind than a sound and reasonably conscious one. Are you trying to be smart with me, Agent Thompson? No, sir. I'm just trying to ascertain how the chain of events transpired. That's it. You leave me no choice. Your badge and it's your firearm. I throw my badge on the deputy director's desk, pull my gun out of its holster, and hand it to him. Sir, this is bullshit. No, Agent Thompson, your actions are bullshit. You brought this upon yourself. I'm suspending you until further notice. I would strongly advise you to circumspectly take a deep introspective look into the abyss that your life is going to become if future acts of this proportion were to occur. You're lucky I didn't formally bring up charges and have your ass canned for this display of debauchery. Is that all, sir? Yes, you may leave, and remember, you're skating on thin ice. As I step out of the deputy director's office, I can't help but feel those deep-rooted spirits of rebellion and even anarchy grow inside of me, and that's when I make the decision to inoculate another deep-rooted spirit that has acquainted me for some time now. But before I do, I need to stop by an old friend. The scene changes. Now it starts out like this. The man nodded out in his desk chair is not only my former college professor, but also my most cherished friend, Dr. Thomas Winston, a survivor of decades of drug abuse and excess, and more importantly, an acclaimed pillar in the field of abnormal psychology. If you're not familiar with this obscure part of history, allow me now to elaborate. Back in the 90s, the doctor was awarded with outstanding achievement from the Nobel Foundation for his profoundly criticized book entitled The Depths of the Anus Complex, where he elaborately explained his famous diagnosis of the much highly skeptical elementary canal analogy of the base process of thinking by those cursed by the plague of this psychological disease. In a review by the New York Times, he was praised as the modern-day Sigmund Freud, but more pretentious critics deemed him as a fraud and a heretic of contemporary psychology, and was even quoted by one doctor of the field as being an immoral fiend who got his jollies off by making a spectacle of that field of thought. So he was denounced by the conventional circles of psychology and labeled an outcast. So what? This is what you will later find out is a huge part of our mission in life. So regardless of what the ignorance of academia thought of him, the anus complex was his mark in history. And with this piece of literature becoming as accomplished as it did, he had righteously met the criteria of this mission and was even hailed by some as one of the last Mohicans of our cause. With that being said, I must also say that he is the most brilliant mind I've ever encountered, and it is most certainly always a pleasure to be his acquaintance and an honor to listen to him philosophize about the darkness of the mind. I tap the desk a couple of times to get his attention. He awakes, and upon noticing me, begins to smile with that distinguished face of age and intellectual perception. My dear Charles, what a pleasure it is to make your acquaintance. Not to be a burden, but I have some unfortunate news, Professor. He just looks at me with a peculiar expression on his face. They've reprimanded me at the Bureau. I'm on leave until further notice. My dear boy, don't bother worrying yourself with these matters of such minute significance. I've told you many times, you were my most favorite student with such an amazing aptitude for the cause. You'll excel in whatever endeavor you choose. Don't succumb to society's way of imprisoning your mind into that hole of flagellance and secretion. Once you enter and condition your mind into that hole of filth, you will regretfully have to claw your way out if you desire change. And once that happens, I know, Professor, you will be metaphorically covered in shit. Precisely, and as you know, feces is not an easy odor to remove once it has smeared onto the anatomy. It will haunt you, that awful smell of indignation. By all means, do not fall into this trap. I do not want you to get stuck inside of those bowels, and I do not want to see the aftermath of you covered in the fecal matter. And please, by all means, Charles, trust me when I tell you that it is quite an awful experience and you do not want to go through. I know, Professor, I just needed to confide this with you. My dear boy, I can tell you have penetrated that unforgiving anus of deception. Resist the lust to avenge your back before it will consume you, and you yourself allegorically become infatuated with the perversion of sodomy. I believe that even in the primitive mind of Christian thought, the Apostle Paul said something like, Sodomites will not enter the kingdom of heaven. This kingdom is a state of mind, being the heights of beatitude. It is impossible to reach a state when your mind is darkened by the desire to penetrate that reverberating hole. That reminds me, there is also an indigenous saying, when the river runs red, don't hit the dirt road. Find high ground and remain as one until the river replenishes. Many have misconstrued this and mistakenly hit the dirt road, and that is why they suffer in their minds. You are way too smart to fall victim to this. Know that if you succumb to this unforgiving hole of deception, the consequences can become detrimental. By all means, Charles, resist with all of your integrity and preserve that wonderful mind of yours. Now, my dear boy, please help an old man with arthritis to a dose of his medicine. The professor pulls out a kit from his desk and opens it. It's filled with a hypodermic syringe, tourniquet, burn spoon, cotton balls, and his preferred medicine, heroin. I put a couple of points of the heroin on the burn spoon with a couple of drops of water from a glass on the professor's desk, add flame, and cook up the dope. Once it's ready, I drop a cotton ball in the spoon and place the needle of the syringe into the cotton ball, and with the plunger, suck up all the dope into the rig. Then I proceed to tie the professor off with the tourniquet and find a vein. Shortly after finding the point of entry, I pierce the professor's arm, drop some blood, and plunge the intoxicant into his bloodstream. The professor's demeanor changes, as the chemical reaction begins to physiologically explode within him. By the look on his face, I can tell he's back in his euphoric paradise. You care for a bump, Charles? I nod my head, break myself out of line, and inhale through my nostril. After a couple of snorts, I catch a drain and find myself back into that blissful state of tranquility, completely content regardless of whatever circumstance life is throwing at me. Understand the heroine as you would a woman, Charles, not in the masculine pretense as others have misconstrued her to be a boy. Know her capabilities and the magic powers that she beholds. When you understand the feminine natures, you will realize she is an emotional creature. So treat her as you would a lady and don't abuse her, because you will end up creating a horrid monster of the worst degree, and she will unleash a woman's scorn. But if you cherish and nurture her for everything that she is, she will bring you into a joyous romance synonymous to that of a fairy tale. That's quite the philosophy lesson, Professor. I hate to cut you short, but I have to get going. Duty calls. But it's been a pleasure seeing you. The pleasure is all mine, Charles. We embrace, and I start to head out of his home. As I'm leaving, I turn around. I will try not to get caught up in the abyss of the asshole. That's the key to life, Charles. Never fall victim to the bowels of that awful rectum, and the possibilities are endless.